Did you know that the Tarrasque, one of D&D's most feared creatures, was actually inspired by a French myth about a fire-breathing monster that was tamed by a saint? What other myths and legends have shaped the worlds of D&D? Stick around to find out. Dungeons & Dragons has transported players into fantastical realms for decades, but did you know how many of its iconic creatures and themes are pulled straight out of real-world myths and legends? From the Greek Chimera to the German Kobold, myths have inspired some of D&D's most memorable monsters, characters, and even its storytelling structure. Today, we will explore these myths and how they shape the game. We'll uncover their historical origins and discuss how they've been adapted into the rich fantasy worlds that we know and love. I'm Josh, the Creator Bard, and welcome back to the Tavern, where we tell the best stories together. Myths and legends have been a cornerstone of human storytelling for, ever. Thousands of years, they were used to explain the mysteries of the world, why it rains, will the sun come up tomorrow, why are we here, how did we get here. They were used to convey cultural values. Do we do this? Why don't we do that? What is honor, shame, glory, guilt, innocence? They were used to entertain, and we still use them for these purposes today. From the epics of Homer to the trickster gods of African folklore, these stories have been passed down through generations, evolving with every retelling. In many ways, D&D is a modern continuation of this tradition, blending old myths and new ideas to create a shared storytelling experience that spans centuries. So now, let's take a closer look at some of these myths and legends that have directly inspired D&D. Go big or go home, I always say, so we are starting with the biggest, baddest monster in the monster manual, the Tarrasque. The Tarrasque is a towering beast of siege and destruction, but did you know that it comes from French folklore? In the original legend, the Tarrasque was a fire-breathing monster with the head of a lion and the shell of a turtle that terrorized the region of Provence. It was subdued by Saint Martha, who tamed it with her prayers. In D&D, it became a nearly unstoppable force of nature, no saint required, but clerics help. Second, the Chimera. This three-headed creature, part lion, goat, and dragon, originates from Greek mythology. It was a monstrous offspring of Typhon and the Echidna, known for its ferocity. In D&D, it retains its terrifying presence as a deadly foe for adventurers. Now for one of our favorites. Whether it's Boblin or Fartbuckle, we all know goblins. These mischievous and cunning creatures in D&D have their roots in European folklore, where they were often seen as small, malevolent creatures who caused trouble for humans. Legends vary widely, from goblins stealing children to acting as guardians of hidden treasure, and D&D has adapted them into a wide array of roles, from comic relief to menacing threats. For those of you who don't like goblins at low levels, you've probably used kobolds. Kobolds are reptilian tricksters, loosely inspired by Germanic folklore, where kobolds were spirits of the earth, something helpful but often mischievous or vengeful if offended. In D&D, they've evolved or devolved into crafty, trap-setting creatures that challenge adventurers in unexpected ways. If you got into D&D the same time I did, circa Critical Role Campaign 1's Insurgents, then you probably remember in Campaign 1 there was a lot of talk about Duergar. These grey dwarves of D&D are drawn from Norse mythology, where the Duergar were master craftsmen and occasionally sinister figures in the legends. D&D's Duergar are twisted subterranean counterparts to their dwarven kin, embodying themes of greed, bitterness, and enslavement to dark powers. And guys, those 5 are just the start. They're like tip of the iceberg. D&D has drawn from countless myths from around the world. Some other notable creatures from myth and legend include the basilisk, the hydra, the dryad, Medusa, the rakshasa, oni, jinn, minotaur, griffin, phoenix, naga, white, golem, manticore, and many more. And many more. Manticore, many more. And many more. While these are great, it is fantastic to draw from myths and legends from everywhere, so all voices can be heard. It does present some unique challenges. But before we get into that, I did want to give you a resource for something that I think handles this concept exceptionally well. I want to tell you about Creatures from Fairy Tale and Legends. This is a book by Fate of the Norns, and it's been adapted from their own system for D&D 5th edition. This book is full of monsters from legend and how to use them in your own games. But it doesn't just give stat blocks. It takes the monsters that you know from 5e and reimagines them based on their original folklore. Want a Fomorian that's informed by actual myth? I got you. Want a Kraken that just happens to be steeped in actual research from, like, real myths? I got you. This book brings these creatures back to their original roots while also adding fresh, creative mechanics for your game, including tiers of play for each monster. If you're serious about crafting a campaign inspired by myths and legends, Creatures from Fairy Tale and Myth is a must-have. This is not sponsored, by the way. I just really think that if you're watching this, you want to know more about myths and legends that inspire D&D, and this book has it. So, like, you know, do the thing. Back to it. Let's dive into the challenges that we face when we begin to adapt ancient myths into the modern day, because not all adaptations are as straightforward as we might think. Bringing myths into a modern game like D&D can sometimes lead to a lot of controversy and some problematic material. For example, some creatures, like goblins or kobolds or orcs, have drawn criticism for oversimplifying cultures, for seeing an entire race or lineage as evil. And rightfully so. Like, when you oversimplify something so much, it is problematic. So one of the things we have to think about when we're adapting creatures from myth into our modern D&D games is, how can I do this with nuance? How can I make sure that I'm not falling into that trap of, like, the trope of bioessentialism and, like, all creatures of this type do these things. All creatures of this type are evil. All creatures of this type have this strength and this wisdom. Because all of these guys are stupid and all of these guys are smart. And that can be challenging, especially if you grew up on the tropes of, like, Tolkien fantasy like I did. Another challenge is just balancing the creativity with respect. Obviously, like I said, we don't want to oversimplify, but while it's exciting to adapt myth, there is a risk of losing the original context or meaning in favor of other things. There is space to be creative, and there is space to respect the original intent of the cultures that brought these creatures forward to begin with. And as DMs or players or creatives in general, it's important to ask, like, are we honoring the source material, or are we unintentionally misrepresenting it? The D&D and TTRPG community in general has worked so hard to address these challenges. Many creators now research myths deeply to ensure respectful and accurate representations. Supplementary materials and cultural consultants have also become more common, helping to celebrate the diversity of myths rather than oversimplify them and cause them to be like a caricature of the cultures that brought them forward. For players and DMs alike, this means an opportunity to explore legends in a way that honors their origins while also being relevant to the stories that we want to tell. When you bring a creature or a story into your game, take time to learn its roots and adapt it thoughtfully. This not only enriches your world, but also fosters an appreciation for the incredible variety of human storytelling traditions. At this point, I really think I should make mention of some of the amazing BIPOC creators and projects out there that are doing their best to bring myths from their heritage and their experience into our games of D&D and other TTRPGs. Creations like Zairu by Hey Malombo. This project is doing some great work bringing African mythology to D&D, creating a world of adventure and mystery with the rich heritage of African traditions. Coyote and Crow by Connor Alexander is another. It is a super creative thought experiment into what the world might look like if Western colonialism had never swept through, with systems in place that emphasize the principles of native wisdom of the First Nations. A popular live play, Desi Quest, is set in a world inspired by the Indian subcontinent, and it brings the vibrant world of Indian thought, expression, and mythos into D&D on a grand scale for audiences to receive and interact with. These are just a few of the many creators and projects that are out there emphasizing real-world myths and legends inspired by cultures throughout history and done exceptionally well. So do your own research, find some that you like, and support them. They're fantastic, and the way that they are bringing their own experience to the forefront is truly amazing. All of that to say this, that myths, legends, fairy tales, these are at the heart of D&D, shaping the creatures we interact with, the worlds we explore, and the stories we tell. From the Tarrasque to the Chimera, these ancient tales connect us to larger storytelling traditions that span cultures and centuries. By understanding their origins, we can create richer, more meaningful adventures that honor the myths that they're based on. So whether you're battling a goblin horde or uncovering an ancient kobold shrine, remember, every story has a history, and we can tell those together. Question time. What's your favorite myth or legend that's inspired D&D? Maybe it's in the books, maybe it's in a supplement, maybe it's something that you and your table got together and decided would be amazing. Leave that lore drop in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've used them in your own games. And if you want to dive deeper into world building, mythology, storytelling, check out my other videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time as we explore the endless stories that make D&D so magical. Till next time, guys, gotta roll.